The new Tears of the Kingdom trailer gave us all a taste of one of Link's brand new abilities, Fuse. This new ability allows Link to join together a variety of objects with his weapons, shields, and arrows. And while fusing a tree branch with a boulder to create a makeshift hammer, or a long stick with a pitchfork to make a long fork, is cool, the highlight of this part of the presentation was Link fusing arrows with items from his inventory to create new types of arrows. For instance, fusing an arrow with an ice elemental item, such as a white choo-choo jelly, essentially creates an ice arrow, while fusing an arrow with a Keese eyeball creates a homing arrow that seems to guarantee a direct hit on a target. Now, it seems that Link will be able to fuse arrows with any item in his inventory, including food items such as apples, raw meat, or mushrooms, monster parts such as choo-choo jellies, horns, and eyeballs, and minerals such as amber, rubies, and luminous stones. So this got me thinking, what other kinds of arrows will Link be able to make? First, let's discuss the pre-existing arrow types that Link will be able to make with his new Fuse ability. These are arrow types that we can reasonably infer from what we have already seen and from what already existed in Breath of the Wild. Given that Link is able to create ice arrows using white choo-choo jelly, it is pretty much guaranteed that both fire arrows and shock arrows will be returning. Link will likely just need to fuse arrows with red and yellow choo-choo jelly respectively to create these arrows. Ancient arrows, on the other hand, seem unlikely to return since the Guardians appear to have disappeared from Hyrule. Perhaps another item will allow us to create arrows with a similar effect, but this remains to be seen. What is less clear is whether or not bomb arrows will be making their return. While it seems likely that they could return, especially since Link no longer has the Sheikah Slate to use bombs whenever he pleases, it is also not clear which item or items will allow Link to create bomb arrows. For now, I would guess that bomb arrows will return, but Link will have to fuse his arrows with a new item that did not exist in Breath of the Wild. The only other type of arrow that we know anything about for sure is homing arrows. While the recent gameplay footage shows us that Link can fuse arrows with Keese eyeballs to make homing arrows, it seems likely that Link will also be able to use Octorok eyeballs to achieve the same result. Perhaps they add different amounts of attack to the arrow or have different ranges, but it seems reasonable that both materials would produce the same type of arrow. Now let's talk about what other types of arrows Link may be able to create. There are a lot of materials in Breath of the Wild, and it seems that there will be as many or more materials in Tears of the Kingdom. Generally, my guess is that many of these materials will fall into categories that will produce the same type of arrow, and they will produce arrows that are already familiar to us, such as elemental arrows, or that just provide some sort of attack buff. However, I want to talk about 5 materials that I think could produce really interesting or unique types of arrows. Number 1. Puff Shrooms. In the most recent footage, Aonuma showed us what happens when Link attaches a new mushroom called a Puff Shroom to his shield. When an enemy strikes the shield, a cloud of smoke is created, shielding Link from the enemy's view and allowing him to sneak behind the enemy for a critical sneak strike. It seems likely that fusing a Puff Shroom with an arrow will allow Link to create a kind of smoke arrow that will make sneaking into enemy encampments much easier. Perhaps there may even be some sort of stealth mission that would require Link to use smoke arrows to get past enemies without triggering some kind of alarm. Number 2. Korok Fronds. Another type of arrow that Aonuma teased was the fusion of arrows with Korok Fronds. In Breath of the Wild, Korok leaves were weapons that also doubled as a way for Link to generate gusts of wind. However, in Tears of the Kingdom, we see that Link's inventory now contains Korok Fronds. Perhaps when Link fuses an arrow with a Korok Frond, he creates a wind arrow that not only strikes an enemy, but also produces a gust of wind that knocks the target and nearby enemies backward, or even upwards into the sky. I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but maybe Korok Fronds could even be used to make tornado arrows that produce a swirling vortex of wind upon impact that sucks in enemies and flings them around in every direction. Number 3. Choo-choo jelly. We already pretty much know what happens when Link fuses an arrow with an elemental choo-choo jelly. But what will happen when he fuses an arrow with a regular, plain old choo-choo jelly? One idea I have is that they will allow Link to create a kind of water arrow. This will allow Link to use arrows to put out fires instead of lighting fires. These water arrows could also be used to douse electric enemies or enemies near an electric current to create an electric field, as happens in Breath of the Wild when you fire electric arrows into a pool of water. If it's not a water arrow though, I think it could also be a bouncy arrow that ricochets off enemies and objects, which could lead to some really cool trick shots on enemies, or to some really interesting puzzles where you have to fire arrows around a corner to hit a switch or something. Number 4. Luminous Stones. It seems that a decent portion of the gameplay in Tears of the Kingdom will involve Link navigating cave systems, as is evidenced by the new cave entrance icons on the minimap in the new footage. In previous footage, we see lots of luminous stones scattered throughout the caves. At first, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if when Link fuses an arrow with a luminous stone, he creates an arrow that, when fired, flies off in the direction of the nearest exit? But then I remembered that with his new Ascend ability, Link always has an easy escape from any tricky cave system. However, maybe these luminous arrows can instead illuminate dark parts of the cave system by emitting some sort of burst of light that keeps the cave lit up for 15 to 30 seconds before petering out. This could make fighting enemies in caves more interesting, since if you are unable to defeat them all before the lights go out, you might find yourself at a disadvantage against enemies that can see in the dark. Number 5. Food. Finally, one material in particular that caught my eye was raw meat. After all, what possible use could there be for combining an arrow with a piece of meat? However, in the recent footage, Aonuma mentioned multiple times that certain types of arrows may be useful for hunting. This made me think about bait, and then I thought, what if meat arrows, or food arrows in general, are used to distract enemies, kind of like how bananas could be used in Breath of the Wild to distract Yiga clan members? I could definitely see this being useful, especially for distracting bigger enemies, like the new boss bokoblins, Hinoxes, or even Lionels. However, food is also used to restore health, so another possibility is that when Link fuses an arrow with a food item that does not have some kind of special effect, he can make healing arrows that restore his hearts by half of the damage dealt to the enemy. This would allow you to heal while attacking without having to open up your menu or rely on fairies, which would just help combat to be even smoother. Well, there you have it. I personally think that Link's new fuse ability has so much potential, especially when it comes to making new arrows. But what do you think? Are you excited about being able to create new arrow types? What other new arrow types do you think we will be able to make? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you all next time. God bless.